Congratulations on this movie. I loved it so much. I am old enough to remember watching Liza with the Z and to remember that time when Liza Minnelli was just on top of the world, dominating popular culture. So
She was the it girl, the Taylor Swift
yeah,
of that era, absolutely. Even more so because I think people today don't realize what it was like to be on the cover of Newsweek and Time the same week. I mean, that was like unheard of, especially for an entertainer. So it was right up there.
yes, and that was when magazines were important and print
Exactly.
magazines. But so I have to start by just asking about how this film came about because I know you brought an interest in Liza and had this incredible treasure trove of archival material to work with.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, basically, I'm a big Broadway fan, always have been. I've done other films. I did a film called Best Worst Thing That Ever Could Have Happened, which was on
Mhm.
Stephen Sondheim's and Hal Prince's Merrily We Roll Along, which
Oh,
is
I love that film. Yeah, it's great.
one of my favorite shows. And I produced it, and Lonnie Price directed it. And I have an interesting history with Liza and kind of the way we got connected because it started actually when I was very young. I was too young to see Cabaret, but I remember seeing the poster, and I
Hmm.
remember thinking, even as a very young kid, that is naughty. I want to see that. I don't know what that is, but that seemed cool. And then in 1980, when Arthur came out, and I was a little older, I was able to see it, and I said, "My God, what's an amazing comedic actress, Liza Minnelli." And then I made the connection. Wow, she was the one in Cabaret. So I started, I watched Cabaret, I watched Sterile Cuckoo, some of her early stuff, and I was just blown away. And then this kind of came to a crescendo in 2008 when she appeared on Broadway in Liza's at the Palace. And it was a time in her life that was, she had just had hip surgery. There was, the crazy marriage that she had just come out of. And there was a big question, could she still sing? And what would she be like? Could she dance?
Right.
And I'll never forget the spotlight came up. She walks out. She does one of the famous
Yeah.
patented Liza moves, and the audience lost its mind in a way that I have never seen. I am talking about, forget standing ovation, people standing on the Broadway seats, grown men and women with tears streaming down their face. And I always remembered that powerful connection that I maybe at that time didn't fully understand with her audience. So when we started looking at what our next film would be, and Dana Craig in my office is a big Liza fan, and she had put Liza on the list, and we said, yeah, it's about time. So when we first started talking to them, Liza's team and Liza, at one point in the conversation, they said, we just found 25 hours of never before seen footage in Liza's locker. I don't know if you'd be interested in it. Of course, as a documentarian, my jaw dropped and we freaked out. When we got the footage in, and I'll never forget, we pressed play and everybody gathered around, and we were just awestruck with this raw, intense talent that was explosive. I think people remember Liza because she's had such a long career in the 80s and the 90s, but the 70s, oh my God. And that's when we went back to Liza and team and pitched. We said we think the real story here is in the 70s, particularly because her mother had just died in June of 1969. And it was this opportunity to see kind of how Liza became Liza. And they loved it. And that's kind of how the film originated.
I mean, what's amazing that comes out is how vulnerable she was, and at the same time as being enormously talented and on top of the world. You have that press conference where she's asked about her looks. it's
It,
sort of
it is
amazing the way she's,
amazing. It's amazing seeing that, a reporter with a straight face in 1975 after she won, she had just come off of Cabaret Oscar and Emmy for Liza with a Z and Tony's, and she was at the top of the world. She looked absolutely stunning.
yeah,
Okay. And not only stunning, uniquely stunning. Nobody else looked like her. And this guy asks her, how does it feel when they call you ugly? I mean, but it's very insightful about the time and a lot of the crap that Liza had to deal as with these enormous expectations on her. I mean, when your mother's Judy Garland,
exactly.
one of the greatest performers of the 20th century, your father is, Vincente Minnelli, one of, the greatest directors of the 20th century. The I don't think people today understand the enormous expectations. And I always say, think of children of iconic stars and how many become as good, if not better, than their parents. I mean, I
Yeah.
can't think of many,
I mean, this gets to what, like, to me, what's the most interesting part of the film, which is this, you made this choice to structure it as portraits of the different mentors along her way. And that's very different than, the usual approach to a portrait of a star. And it's so fascinating the way, to learn about all these people and how Liza, she says that they made her what she is.
Yeah, I mean, no, I mean you hit on the thing that gets me excited about the
Yeah,
film, which is that, when you're doing a documentary on a bigger than life person, it's very easy to fall into what's called the like cradle to grave. It's like, and then she did this, and then she made this movie, and then she did this song, and then she was
right.
big. And that becomes so boring over time because, yeah, you love the person, you love to see the footage, but there's no real story there. So one of the rules I always have is letting the material speak to me. And when we look through all these thousands of hours of footage of Liza with interviews, a couple of times she kept saying this idea of, "Oh, he invented me," and "Oh, Halston, he invented me." Oh, no. And it was an interesting turn of phrase. So then the first time I interviewed her, we sat down, and I think it was like the first question I asked her. I said, you know, Fred Ebb, oh, Freddie invented me. And that's when it kind of clicked. Ah, okay. This is how she really sees the world and her life, which is very unusual that she actually, has that, humble aspect of her personality to celebrate those who helped her. And she sees her talent as, yes, of course, she had enormous raw talent, but in terms of the fine tuning of the talent, she sees it really as her talent of picking the right people to be around. And my God, I mean, if you have, the genius of Halston dressing
Yeah.
you and the genius of Bob Fosse and Kay Thompson, I mean, these people, these are the people she picked, and she picked obviously very well.
Yeah. Yeah. So making the film was the first time that you met her. Uh,
Yes.
and could you just talk a bit about just the first stages of getting her comfortable about doing this? I mean, I think this must, you know, she's very open to allowing this portrait to be done and very revealing and very candid with you.
I I think I always tell the story, which to me is so different from any other project I ever worked on with a celebrity, where at the end of one of the days of shooting, she actually asked, "Oh, could you have Bruce come in?" And I was holding court, with Liza. She was in her bedroom. She
Mm.
was on the edge of the bed, and I walk in. I'm like, okay, what is this going to be about? And she reaches up and she grabs my hand and she starts petting it. And she looks up with, those dark saucer eyes and says, Bruce, don't put anything phony in the film.
Mm,
Don't make me look like a phony. And I was like, oh my God, I have never, when you work with people like her, it's always the opposite. It's like, oh, I hate the makeup. Can we reshoot that scene? Oh, I don't like what that person said about me. She was the exact opposite. And
mm.
that shows, I think, how comfortable she is in her own skin. And I think the other thing that's a really interesting, very, very unique Liza thing is, and it's mentioned a little in the film, but it really is true. When you meet her and you hang out with her, it's like, you're very conscious, like this is a legend, this is an iconic person. And you know what? If you met somebody like that, you'd want to say, "Oh my God, I've loved you since Cabaret, blah blah blah." But the interesting dynamic, and this is mentioned by Jim Caruso in the film, and it's so true. She wants you to like her. And it is so unnerving and so unusual and so Liza that tell me about you.
Yeah.
What are you up to? What do you like? And
Mm.
she's looking at you, and you do come away with, just meeting her for a minute or two saying, "Oh my God, she's my best friend. I could totally call her tomorrow and just chat on the phone because she wants you to be a friend." And I think part of that is the vulnerability of wanting to have that love and to have friends who really care for her, which she has been lucky to have.
Yeah, it was touching to see that couple that she was friends with for such a long time who.
The Lazars.
Yeah.
As we're making the film, we're talking to Mia, we're talking about everybody's like, you talked to Alan and Arlene, right? Like, oh, you talked to Alan and Arlene. Unfortunately, Alan has passed since then,
Yeah.
but I can't express how close that couple was to Liza. In fact, they had this thing where they would, I think they would call it kitchen cabinet or something like that, where they would go in the kitchen and they would tell their most intimate secrets that they wouldn't tell anyone else, and it couldn't leave the kitchen. I mean, they have a really incredible relationship, 50 plus years.
Amazing. What was it like for Liza to see the film and to see all this material, which you said she hadn't looked at all this archival footage, so it must have been.
Yes, I think, I mean, the sense that I got was that she was very relieved, happy that the film celebrated her mentors. And I think she
Mm,
wasn't expecting that. And I think the idea that, you know, she can get this story out of how these people really nurtured her and helped her so much, she was very pleased about that.
yeah. And I mean, I guess you sort of hinted at it a bit in talking about how much she cares about the people that she's with. But what is it about her that made her so open to these mentorships? I mean, it's sort of a hard question to answer, but
Yeah, I think part of it is, somebody with a big ego
mhm.
is not going to be open to a mentor, right? Because they did it.
Right.
It's their genius. They did it. And one of the most that I really believe that, part of the message of the film to me that comes through, and this, trust me, is not intended. It's one of those like miracles of filmmaking where the film starts, talking to you and telling you the film you made. But one of the really interesting things upon watching it now that it's kind of done, is this message about the power of mentors to transform us. And I think many of us,
Yeah.
myself included, have at times been closed to mentors, to people who really you know, can show you the way because we feel, oh, I know about that, or I know about that. And I think Liza's life is a case study in the fact of taking raw talent and being open to change, to different ideas from people who are, talented, how it could really transform your life and make it better, especially your creative life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much. It's such a just such a pleasure to watch this. And everybody, I'm sure, is going to be running home to watch Cabaret. And
Thank you for coming and seeing it. We really appreciate it.